Hey everyone, Military Gun Guy here. I am continuing work on this 1891 Danish Krag stock. If you recall, we had basically pinned the stock. It was completely snapped in half here. I don't know if the camera will show it, but the repair is actually starting to come along nicely. I've actually filled a lot of these holes. I still have quite a bit more filling to do. And I'm also trying to blend this seam right here so that it will actually be about as close to invisible as possible. Something else that I've done, something else that I did, also if you recall, I had installed some screws into the stock to give it some rigidity. I put a screw up through this way, and one went through this way, and then also put a dowel this way. I have these wooden plugs, and I actually use these wooden plugs to plug the holes. You can see I did it there. You can use a piece of balsa wood, but the problem is that typically the wood doesn't match, and what happens is that you actually will get like either a dark spot because it takes the stain differently. So I try to closely match the wood as best as possible. I left this one for you guys so you can kind of see how it's done, and I still have to repair this seam right here along with the numerous nail holes that you recall were holding this thing together. There was also a large chunk that had been taken out, so what I ended up doing is kind of milling out this area with a Dremel, and then I'm going to actually take a piece of donor wood, probably from this Gewehr 88 stock. I actually have another one that's a little bit better shape. And I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to splice it in, and then I'm going to blend that repair as well. So when I'm done, this thing should actually be about as close to invisible as I can get it. You'll also notice that it's kind of dark here. When you're sanding, the heat from this rifle's 100 and change years old. It's going to be impossible to get all of the cosmoline out. So what happens is a lot of times when you're sanding it, the heat from sanding will actually bring it up. Generally what I do is before I do the stain and top coat, I'll give it another couple of washes of degreaser, or I'll use scrubbing bubbles, or I'll use, one of the other formulas, and then I'll try to bleach it one more time. I did bleach the buttstock, and I was able to get a lot of the rust stains out. There's still one right there I have to work on, but this was all black. Typically these things are stored on the butt, and they would just attract, moisture and whatnot that would get trapped under the butt plate, and then of course it would rust. So all that aside, I've used Titebond on this one, okay? Very, very simple, just a little hacksaw, doesn't have to be anything fancy. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in, and I'm going to cut this flush. Okay, this thing actually broke halfway through, not a problem. A couple things you can do if you cut it a little bit higher. You can take a rasp, and you can very lightly go down on this until it gets semi-level. You don't want to get it to the exact level because the rasp actually is quite abrasive, because hence it's a rasp. So what ends up happening is that you'll end up kind of cutting into your wood. You don't want that because it's more finishing work. Sometimes you can make fast work with a file, okay? And you can sort of rough shape what you need there. Take a little brush. Okay, so as you can see, it's actually nice and flush. It's a tad bit hard to see, and it'll actually disappear once we get this thing stained. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start blending this repair right here. This was part of the original crack. I don't know if you can see it right there. This was part of the original crack. Come on, focus, stupid thing. There we go. It's part of the original crack. It's dark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put some Titebond in there. And I'm going to sand it. There's a similar video made by Larry Potterfield from Midway, USA, where he does sort of the same thing. You can do it with shellac. And I'm going to basically build up layers using the original wood and some wood glue to actually blend the seam. Some people say, hey, why don't you use filler? Because filler's garbage. Unfortunately, the filler will not take the stain evenly or properly, so you'll have this very bright sort of seam that you obviously want to hide. Here, I could have opted to fill it, but the problem is it was such a large piece that was taken out and it was so jagged that it was easier for me to fix the stock, get it basically loosely together, and then turn around and actually go in and splice another piece in. The splice will actually hide the repair a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with these holes right here. I don't know if you can see them. Let me zoom in. There we go. 2 seconds. Using my new DSLR, so it has a little bit better range of focus than my other stuff. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm basically going to do, this is already been kind of cleaned out, and again, I want these holes to be invisible. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to put a couple of drops of Titebond in there. Okay, I can also do here if I want, and I'm basically just going to use it to fill the seam. Okay, again, you can do this with shellac and a toothpick. There's a number of ways you can do it. They're all going to end up being about the same. The shellac is takes a little bit longer, a little more tedious. Let it set up for, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And then I'm basically just going to go in and sand. If you're using a sanding block like the ones from Harbor Freight that I like to use, you're going to kind of burn through these pretty fast, mainly because the glue will clog up the mixture quite rapidly. But you can already see where it's kind of filled it in. Come on, focus. There we go. You can see where it started to fill it in already. As we sand and blend this more and more, this will actually almost disappear. And what we're using is the existing wood that's on the stock to actually kind of mix with the Titebond or Carpenter's wood glue or Elmer's, whatever you want to use, to make this repair invisible. Because again, you're using the original wood. Some people will make a paste out of sawdust or whatnot. Sort of ends up being about the same thing. So just going to give it kind of a rough sand. It already is, this fucking thing, already is looking better. Same as these. These will start to disappear as we sand more. These black little edges are just basically epoxy that's still on the stock. So again, we'll get rid of that. I'm going to fix this seam up here, and I'm going to fix this down here just to blend it a little bit better. Come on, focus. There we go. And then when I come back for the last part of the repair section, I'm actually going to show you how to splice a piece in here. But in the meantime, we're going to try to get this repair as invisible as possible. And you may have to do successive layers of this just because you know, the glue is going to find the depression, it's going to settle itself in, it's going to soak into the wood a little bit, and then what will end up happening is that you'll have a low spot. So it's the same as doing body work, where you want to actually get this filled up a little bit higher and then sand it down to where it's going to use the wood from the surrounding area to actually clean up this. So all right, that's looking better. And again, once this is stained, this will actually really minimize quite a bit. This will take stain at a different rate. You may have to dilute it a little bit, but once you kind of clean it and sand it out and whatnot over time, it'll actually blend to where you won't even see this. I'm going to use a dark enough stain to blend this properly. Let's see how this one turned out. This looks pretty good. Yeah, this one's low. To blend this properly, and then go over it with layers of this buffing thing, I forgot what I call them, scour buffing pad. And that'll sort of kind of level the finish out a little bit because you'll get dark spots and light spots. Again, this is going to be cleaned after I'm completely done sanding. So right now it's just a matter of filling holes as best I can. Okay. And you'll probably do this a few times until you're satisfied with how much is actually in, how much of your seam has been hidden in the stock and the with the glue and sawdust mixture. And you don't have to kill it. I mean, you're just basically You're kind of lightly sanding to pick up just the dust in order to just lightly fill this. I mean, once it sets up, you can give it a much more vigorous sanding to level it out. And again, look for your low spots, which there's going to be plenty. Because, you know, the epoxy does shrink as it dries. So it will go into the low areas. You can use the epoxy as well with sawdust as a filler. The problem is the epoxy will tend to take on a bit of a darker hue, which will actually not be pleasing once you're done. So your crack will be a lot more noticeable, which is what we want to avoid. You know, we're trying to actually restore this thing back to looking as issued as possible. The final sand will knock a lot of the high spots down, and it'll actually minimize the vast majority of what you see. There's still some epoxy here. I generally like to cut that quickly with the file. The file will actually save your sanding blocks a little bit, but not that much. And the dust will naturally go into the low areas as well. Okay, that's probably about as good as that's going to get. I'm going to work on this a little bit more. Sometimes if you run your finger over it as well, your finger will naturally expose the low areas that still need attention. And the process continues. Okay. Get all this dust off. Just a little low spots. Okay. All right, so that's about as good as that's going to get for this session. We need to let this set up. Let me back this out a little bit. Get back. There we go. Let this set up a bit, but you can see where it's starting to really fade. Again, once we wash this stock one more time, clean it up, you know, especially pay attention to this area, you'll actually find that this will minimize even more. You know, we're going to sand these out just a bit more to make them disappear, sand a little bit more in there, and make this thing nice and smooth and ready for top coat. So thanks for watching. Oh, also something else we'll be doing down the line, you can see these grasping grooves. I'm going to recut them as well. I'll show you how to do that. I started on this one already, but that's another project. So anyway, thanks for watching. Any questions, email me, militarygunguy702@gmail.com. Any advice or anything you want me to watch me restore or repair, or anything you have questions on, hit me up. Hope you like my videos, and please subscribe. Thanks for watching.